The mining moon of Valith 9 was a nightmare of black rock and burning sky. Sergeant Marcus Cole pressed his back against a broken wall and listened to the screams of dying men. Somewhere in the distance, the Harrow swarm was eating its way through another human squad. Marcus checked his rifle. 12 shots left. 12 shots between him and a very ugly death. He was part of the 41st Human Auxiliary Corps, which was a fancy way of saying he was meat. The Noctari, the ancient vampire species that ruled this part of the galaxy, had been fighting the swarm for 300 years. They needed soldiers. Humans were cheap, bred fast, and died without complaint. Well, mostly without complaint. Sergeant. Private Torres crawled up beside him, his young face covered in dust and blood. Command says the princess's ship went down 2 clicks north. They want us to go get her. Marcus laughed. It was not a happy sound. They want 8 humans to walk into a swarm nest and rescue Noctari royalty? Yes, Sergeant. And our extraction? Torres swallowed hard. They said if we survive, they'll send a shuttle. If. That was the word that defined human existence in this war. If you survive. If you're lucky. If the immortals decide you're worth saving. Marcus stood up. He looked at his squad 8 men and women who had somehow lived through 6 months of hell. They were tired. They were scared. They were human. Let's go get ourselves a princess, he said. They moved through the ruins like ghosts. The swarm had already passed through this area, leaving behind nothing but bones and silence. Marcus had seen a lot of death in his 32 years. He had stopped counting the bodies a long time ago. A crash site was worse than he expected. The royal cruiser had broken apart on impact, scattering expensive wreckage across a wide crater. Swarm drones crawled over the metal like ants on a dead animal. Marcus counted at least 40 of them, biomechanical nightmares with too many legs and mouths full of poison. There, Private Chun whispered. She pointed to the center of the wreckage. I see movement. Marcus raised his scope. Through the smoke and fire, he saw her. Princess Serafina Valmorthen was pinned under a steel beam, a piece of metal driven through her stomach. Her silver hair was matted with black blood. Her pale skin had turned gray. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the green lines of swarm venom spreading up her neck. She was dying. Immortals were not supposed to die, but the swarm had found a way. She's got maybe 2 hours, Marcus said. The venom is killing her. Then she's already dead, Corporal Webb muttered. Sarge, there's no way we can. I didn't ask for your opinion. Marcus turned to face his squad. Here's what's going to happen. Torres, Chun, and Webb, you're going to make noise on the east side. Draw the drones away. The rest of you, cover me while I get to her. And then what? Webb asked. We carry a dying Noctari princess 40 kilometers through enemy territory. On foot? Yes, that's suicide. Marcus smiled. It was not a kind smile. Private, we've been dead since the day they put us in uniform. Might as well die for something. They hit the swarm hard and fast. Torres threw his last grenade into a cluster of drones. Chun fired until her rifle melted in her hands. Webb screamed curses at creatures that didn't understand fear. Marcus ran. He crossed the crater in seconds, sliding under broken metal and jumping over burning wreckage. A drone came at him from the left. He put 2 bullets in its head and kept moving. Another one grabbed his leg. He kicked it off and kept moving. Nothing was going to stop him. Not today. He reached the princess and dropped to his knees beside her. Up close, she was beautiful in the way that all Noctari were beautiful, perfect features. Ageless skin, eyes like red diamonds. She looked at him with confusion. Human? She whispered. Her voice was weak. Sergeant Marcus Cole, Your Highness. I'm here to get you out. Leave me. She coughed black blood. I am dying. Your life is not worth my corpse. Marcus grabbed the steel beam and pulled. His muscles screamed. His back threatened to break. But the beam moved, inch by inch, until he could drag her free. My life isn't worth much anyway, he said. So let's not waste it. He lifted her onto his back. She weighed almost nothing. Noctari were lighter than they looked. But the venom in her veins made her body burn like fire against his skin. Behind him, he heard Torres scream. Then silence. Marcus didn't look back. He started walking. The first 5 kilometers were the hardest. The swarm was everywhere, hunting for survivors. Marcus moved through the darkness like a shadow, carrying his dying cargo through tunnels and trenches. Twice, he had to fight. Twice, he killed things that should have killed him. The princess drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she spoke in her ancient language words that Marcus didn't understand. Sometimes she just stared at him with those red eyes, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Why? She asked him once, as he stopped to catch his breath. Why do you carry me? Marcus wiped the sweat from his face. Because someone has to. That is not an answer. It's the only one I've got. By kilometer 20, only 3 of his squad remained. Chun had taken a poison spike to the throat. Webb had stayed behind to hold a bridge. Now it was just Marcus, Torres, and a young soldier named Kim, who hadn't spoken in hours. The princess was getting worse. The venom had reached her heart. Marcus could feel it in the way she shook, the way her breath came in short gasps. She needs blood, Torres said. Noctari heal with blood. Everyone knows that. Marcus looked at his arm. Then he looked at the princess. Human blood was garbage to the Noctari. They didn't drink it. They barely acknowledged that humans had blood at all. But maybe garbage blood was better than no blood. He cut his wrist with his combat knife and held it to her lips. Drink, he said. She looked at him with horror. I cannot. It is forbidden. Your blood is keeping you alive. Drink. She drank. It wasn't much. A few mouthfuls. But the color came back to her face, just a little. The shaking stopped, just for a moment. Marcus wrapped his wrist and kept walking. 20 more kilometers. 20 more kilometers, and maybe, just maybe, they would live. Behind them. The swarm howled in the darkness. Ahead, there was nothing but fire and hope. Marcus Cole kept walking. Torres died at kilometer 25. He died holding a narrow canyon pass while Marcus carried the princess through. He died screaming human curses at swarm drones that felt no fear and knew no mercy. He died with a smile on his face because he knew that his death meant something. Marcus heard the screams stop. He didn't slow down. Private Kim walked beside him in silence. She was 19 years old. She had joined the auxiliary corps because her family needed the money. Now she was the last of the 41st, walking through hell with a sergeant who refused to quit and a princess who should have been dead hours ago. Sergeant, Kim said quietly. Your wrist is bleeding again. Marcus looked down. The cut had opened up. He had given the princess 3 more transfusions over the past 5 kilometers. Each time, it kept her alive a little longer. Each time, he got a little weaker. I know, he said. You'll die if you keep giving her blood. I know that too. Kim was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Why do you care? She's Noctari. They treat us like animals. It was a fair question. Marcus had asked himself the same thing 100 times since they started walking. The Noctari had taken his home. They had taken his family. They had taken everything he ever loved and ground it into dust for their endless war. But when he looked at the woman on his back, this ancient creature who was fighting to live with every breath, he didn't see a Noctari. He saw a person, scared, alone, dying. Maybe I'm tired of letting people die, he said. even people who don't deserve to live. The princess stirred against his back. Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. I heard that. Good. Stay awake. We're almost there. They weren't almost there. They had 15 kilometers left, and the swarm was closing in from every direction. Marcus could hear them in the darkness, clicking, scratching, hungry. The drones had their scent now. It was only a matter of time. Seraphine's hand found his shoulder. Her fingers were cold, trembling. Human, Marcus, put me down. No, I am dying anyway. The venom has reached my heart. Nothing can stop it now. She coughed, and black blood stained his uniform. You can still live. Take the young one and run. Leave me here. Marcus laughed. It surprised him. He didn't think he had any laughter left. Your Highness, I've been carrying you for 30 kilometers. My squad is dead. I've given you half my blood. If I put you down now, what was any of it for? You would die for nothing. I've been dying for nothing my whole life. At least this time, it's my choice. The princess went silent, but her grip on his shoulder tightened, just a little. They walked through a dead city. Once, it had been a mining settlement, humans and other lesser species working the ore fields for their Noctari masters. Now it was bones and ashes. The swarm had passed through here months ago, leaving nothing behind, but Ghost. Kim found a medical station in one of the ruined buildings. Most of the supplies were gone, but there was enough to patch Marcus's wrist and give the princess a shot of something that slowed the venom. It wasn't a cure. Nothing was a cure, but it bought them time. Tell me about yourself, Seraphina said as they rested. Her eyes were half closed, but she was fighting to stay conscious. Tell me about humans. Marcus leaned against a broken wall. He was so tired. What do you want to know? How long do you live? 80 years if we're lucky. Most of us don't get that. And you fight anyway? You know you will die, and you still fight? What else would we do? She studied him with those red eyes. In 400 years, she had never looked at a human really looked at one. They were background noise, servants, tools. But this man had carried her through darkness for hours. He had given her his blood. He had watched his friends die and kept walking. You are strange creatures, she said. We get that a lot. Kim stood watch at the window. Suddenly she tensed. Sergeant, movement, a lot of it. Marcus forced himself to stand. His head was spinning from blood loss, but he grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Outside, the darkness was alive with swarm drones. Hundreds of them, pouring through the streets like a living wave. They found us, Kim whispered. Then we keep moving. Marcus turned to the princess. Can you walk? Seraphina tried to stand. Her legs gave out immediately. The venom had taken too much from her. She looked up at Marcus with something he had never seen in a Noctari's eyes before. Shame. I cannot, she said. I'm sorry. He lifted her onto his back again. Don't be sorry. Just stay alive. They ran. The next 5 kilometers were a blur of gunfire and blood. Kim fought like a demon, covering their retreat with everything she had. Marcus ran until his legs screamed for mercy, then ran some more. The princess held on to him with what little strength she had left, her cold breath against his neck. They burst out of the city and onto open ground. In the distance, Marcus could see the extraction point, a flat ridge where Dominion ships could land. It was so close. So impossibly close. Kim screamed behind him. He turned and saw her fall, 3 swarm drones pulling her down. She looked at Marcus with calm eyes. Keep running, Sergeant. Then she was gone. Marcus ran. He ran until his heart was ready to burst. He ran until his vision went dark at the edges. He ran until he reached the ridge and collapsed to his knees, the princess falling from his back. Above them, ships were descending. Dominion cruisers with the royal banner flying from their wings. Rescue had come, but Marcus couldn't see it. The world was fading. He had given too much blood. He had pushed too hard. His heart, his stubborn human heart, was finally giving up. Sarafina crawled to him. She was crying. Noctari didn't cry. They weren't supposed to feel enough to cry. But tears of black blood ran down her face as she pulled his head into her lap. "No," she whispered. "No, you cannot die. Not after everything. Not for me." Marcus looked up at her. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes closed. His heart stopped. Serafina screamed his name into the burning sky. She screamed the name of a human she had known for 16 hours. A human who had given everything for her. And as the ships landed around them, as soldiers rushed toward them, she made a decision. She would not let him go. The ancient words came to her lips, words forbidden. Words sacred, words that would change everything. She cut her wrist with trembling fingers. She pressed it to his cold lips. "Drink," she whispered. "Please, drink." And somewhere in the darkness between life and death, Marcus Cole heard her voice calling him back. Marcus opened his eyes to a ceiling made of gold. For a long moment, he simply stared at it. Gold was not something he had seen very often in his life. Humans didn't have gold. Humans had dirt and blood and cheap metal bunks in crowded barracks. Gold was for the Noctari. He sat up slowly. His body felt strange stronger than it should, lighter than it should. Every sound in the room was sharp and clear. He could hear footsteps in the hallway outside. He could hear heartbeats from rooms away. He could hear his own heartbeat, slow and steady, like a drum beating underwater. "You are awake." He turned his head. Serafina stood in the doorway, watching him with those red eyes. She looked different now, a healthy, whole, no trace of the venom that had been killing her. She was dressed in white silk, her silver hair falling around her shoulders like water dots. She was beautiful. That thought came to Marcus without permission, and he pushed it away. "How long?" he asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. 3 days. She walked toward him slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal. "You died on that ridge. Your heart stopped. I brought you back." Marcus looked down at his hands. They looked the same, but they felt different. He flexed his fingers and saw the faint glow of something red beneath his skin, like fire running through his veins. "What did you do to me?" Serafina sat on the edge of his bed. She was quiet for a long time before she spoke. "There is a ritual among my people. The blood binding. It ties two souls together forever. It is sacred. It is only used between bonded mates or eternal servants." She paused. "It has never been used on a human before. You bound yourself to me?" "Yes." Marcus stared at her. In the hierarchy of the galaxy, humans were at the bottom. They were nothing. They were less than nothing. A Noctari princess binding herself to a human was like a queen marrying an insect. "Why?" he asked. "Because you gave your life for mine." Her eyes met his, and he saw something burning there, something fierce and desperate and terrifyingly honest. "You carried me through hell. You gave me your blood. You died for me, and you did not even know my name. No one has ever." Her voice broke. "No one has ever done anything like that for me." Marcus didn't know what to say. He looked away, uncomfortable with the intensity in her gaze. "So what am I now?" he asked. Am I a vampire?" "Noctari," she corrected automatically. Then she shook her head. "No, you are not Noctari. The binding did not turn you into one of us. It made you something new, something the galaxy has never seen before." She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were cold, but gentle. "You are human still, but you are more than human now. Stronger, faster. Your senses are sharper. Your lifespan. She hesitated. I do not know how long you will live. Perhaps centuries. Perhaps forever. Marcus closed his eyes. 3 weeks ago, he had been a disposable soldier with no future. Now he was something impossible, a human touched by immoral blood, bound to a princess of the eternal dominion. His squad was dead. Everyone he had served with was gone. And he was still here, breathing, thinking, feeling. It didn't seem fair. The court knows, Seraphina said quietly. My family knows what I did. They are not happy. That was probably the biggest understatement in the history of the galaxy. Marcus looked at her. What happens now? Before she could answer, the doors burst open. Soldiers in black armor flooded into the room, followed by a man who could only be Noctari royalty. He was tall and cruel-looking, with eyes like frozen blood and a mouth twisted in disgust. Seraphina, he said, his voice like ice. Step away from that creature. The princess stood. Her chin lifted, and Marcus saw something change in her. The scared girl who had nearly died on Velith 9 disappeared, replaced by a woman of power and steel. Lord Councillor Morthen, she said. Father, I did not expect you so soon. Her father. Of course. Marcus stayed very still on the bed, watching the scene unfold. The court has convened, Lord Morthen said. They have ruled that your little ritual was a violation of sacred law. The binding must be severed. And if I refuse? His eyes flicked to Marcus with pure hatred. If you refuse, we will sever it ourselves. The human will die. You will be cleansed. And this embarrassment will be forgotten. Seraphina stepped between her father and Marcus. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady. He saved my life. He is a human. His life has no value. His life has more value than any in this court. She turned to face the soldiers, the counselors, everyone who had come to take Marcus away. He gave everything for me. His squad. His blood. His heart. He died on that ridge, and he died fighting. And he died because he believed that my life was worth more than his. She looked at her father with burning eyes. That debt does not end because it inconveniences you. Lord Morthen's face twisted. You would shame our family for a piece of human garbage? I would burn this palace to the ground before I let you kill him. The room went silent. Soldiers gripped their weapons. Counselors exchanged nervous glances. Lord Morthen stared at his daughter like he had never seen her before. Marcus stood up from the bed. He was still weak, still confused, still trying to understand what he had become. But he walked to Seraphine's side and faced the Noctari Lord without fear. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly. I didn't ask to be saved. I didn't ask to be bound to your daughter. All I did was carry a dying woman through the dark, because no one else would. He met Lord Morthen's eyes. If that makes me garbage, then I guess I'm garbage. But I won't die lying down. Not anymore. Seraphina took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lord Morthen turned away. This is not over, he said. The court will find another way. He looked at his daughter one last time. You have made a terrible mistake. He left. The soldiers followed. The doors closed and Marcus and Seraphina were alone. She was still holding his hand. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said. You could have let them take me. Your family, your position. My family cares only about power, she interrupted. My position means nothing if I have no honor. She turned to face him, and her eyes were wet with unshed tears. You taught me that, Marcus Cole. On that moon, in that darkness, you taught me what honor really means. Marcus didn't know what to say, so he just held her hand a little tighter. Outside the golden windows, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the swarm was still coming. The war was not over. And Marcus Cole, human soldier, impossible creature, bound companion to a princess of blood, was just beginning to understand what he had become. The video spread across the galaxy like fire. Someone had recovered footage from the soldiers. Helmet cameras on Valith 9. It showed everything. Marcus carrying the princess through the swarm. Torres dying at the canyon pass. Kim's last stand in the ruined streets. It showed a human doing the impossible while his masters sat safely in their ships above. Within 3 days, every human in the Dominion had seen it. Marcus watched the reactions from Seraphim's private quarters. He had been given rooms in the palace, not servant quarters, but guest rooms, decorated with silks and precious metals that made him uncomfortable. He didn't belong in a place like this. He had spent his whole life sleeping on dirt and concrete. "They are calling you a hero," Seraphina said. She stood beside him, watching the news feed scroll across the screen. Human colonies across 6 sectors have started using your name as a rallying cry. "I'm not a hero. I just did what needed to be done." That is exactly what heroes say. Marcus turned away from the screen. He didn't want to be a symbol. He didn't want to be anything except what he had always been, a soldier doing his job. But the universe had other plans. In the months since his awakening, he had learned to live with his new body. The blood binding had changed him in ways he was still discovering. He could run faster than any human alive. He could see in darkness. He could hear whispers from across a crowded room. His wounds healed in hours instead of weeks, but he was still human. He still needed food. He still needed sleep. He still felt fear and doubt and loneliness. He was caught between 2 worlds, not Noctari enough for the court, not human enough for his own people anymore. Seraphina was the only one who understood. They had grown close in the weeks since the binding. Not romantic, Marcus didn't know how to think about that, but something deeper. She was the only person in the palace who looked at him like he was real. Everyone else saw a symbol or a scandal. She saw Marcus. "The War Council meets today," she said. "The swarm has taken 3 more systems. They are moving toward the core worlds. And your father still wants me dead? My father wants many things. He will not get them." She paused, something shifting in her expression. "The council has requested your presence." Marcus laughed. "They want to parade the pet human in front of the generals? They want your advice." She turned to face him, and her eyes were serious. "You survived Valith 9 when immortal warriors could not. You fought the swarm with nothing but a rifle and human stubbornness. The generals are losing this war, Marcus. They need new ideas, and they think I have them? I think you do." The War Council chamber was a cathedral of black stone and red banners. 12 generals sat around a massive table, their ancient faces carved with centuries of experience. Lord Mortham presided at the head, his eyes following Marcus with cold hatred. Marcus stood at the opposite end, feeling very small and very mortal. "Sergeant Cole," the High General said. She was old even by Noctari standards, nearly 2,000 years, with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "My princess speaks highly of your combat abilities. She claims you have insights that might help us defeat the swarm." "I'm just a soldier, High General. I don't know anything about strategy. Tell us anyway." Marcus looked around the room. Every face was skeptical. These were immortal beings who had fought wars longer than human civilization had existed. What could he possibly teach them? But then he remembered Valith 9. He remembered Torres and Kim and all the others who had died in the dark. He remembered carrying Seraphina through hell because no one else would. "The swarm doesn't fear you," he said quietly. "That's your problem." Lord Mortham scoffed. "They are mindless drones. They fear nothing." "Exactly. And neither do you." Marcus stepped forward, his voice growing stronger. Your soldiers are immortal. They have centuries of training, the best weapons, the strongest bodies. But they fight like they have forever to win. They're careful. They're patient. They're predictable. He looked at the High General. Humans are different. We know we're going to die. Every fight could be our last. So we fight like it. We take risks that make no sense. We sacrifice ourselves for objectives that shouldn't matter. We do insane, stupid, desperate things because we have nothing to lose. He pointed at the strategic map on the table. The swarm expects your soldiers to be careful. They plan for patience. They don't plan for crazy. The room was silent. Then the High General spoke. What do you suggest, Sergeant? Let me train your soldiers. Not to fight like humans. They can't do that. But I can teach them to think like humans. To fight with urgency. To take risks. To be unpredictable. Lord Morton slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. We will not learn warfare from a creature who lives barely a century. Father. Seraphine's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Perhaps that century of urgency is exactly what we need. The High General studied Marcus for a long moment. Then she nodded. You will train the princess's personal guard. 50 soldiers. If your methods show results, we will discuss expanding the program. Marcus bowed his head. Thank you, High General. The training began the next day. At first, the Noctari guards resented him. They were elite soldiers, each 1 centuries old, and they did not appreciate being taught by a human who had been alive for barely 3 decades. But Marcus didn't care about their pride. He cared about keeping them alive. He taught them to move in ways they had never considered. To attack without warning. To retreat without shame. To think 3 steps ahead and then throw away the plan when everything went wrong. Fear is not weakness, he told them one night, after a brutal training session. Fear is information. It tells you that something matters enough to lose. If you fight without fear, you fight without caring. And if you don't care, you've already lost. Slowly, they began to understand. Seraphina watched from the observation deck, her eyes following Marcus as he moved among her soldiers. She had lived for 400 years, and in all that time, she had never met anyone like him. He was mortal, fragile, temporary, but he burned with a fire that made immortals look like shadows. The binding had given him her blood, but it had given her something to his perspective, his urgency, his terrifying, beautiful mortality. For the first time in centuries, Seraphina Valmorthen was afraid of losing something, and that fear made her feel more alive than she had ever felt before. Outside the palace windows, the stars were dimming. The swarm was coming. The war that would decide the fate of the Dominion was almost here, and Marcus Cole, human soldier, impossible creature, symbol of a species that refused to die, was ready. The sky above the throne world was burning. Marcus stood on the palace balcony and watched the swarm fleet descend through the atmosphere like a plague of locusts. Hundreds of ships, thousands of drones, millions of the biomechanical nightmares that had been eating their way across the galaxy for 3 centuries. They had finally reached the heart of the Eternal Dominion. The Hive Admiral is leading the assault personally, Seraphina said, standing beside him. She was dressed for war, now black armor that hugged her body, twin blades strapped to her back. 4 centuries of peaceful existence had ended. The princess had become a warrior. He's targeting you specifically, Marcus said. The intelligence reports are clear. He wants to kill the symbol. Then let him come. Her eyes met his, and he saw no fear there. Only determination. We will show him what symbols can do. In the 6 months since Marcus had begun training the Noctari guards, the war had changed. His soldiers, because that's what they were now. His soldiers had won 17 impossible battles using tactics the swarm never expected. They fought with human desperation. They took risks that made no sense. They won. And now the swarm was afraid. The Hive Admiral had decided that the only way to stop this new threat was to cut off its head. Kill the princess who had started it all. Kill the human who had shown the immortals how to fight. Marcus checked his weapons. 2 rifles, 4 pistols, 12 grenades, and a combat knife that had been with him since Valith 9. He was as ready as he would ever be. Whatever happens today, Seraphina said quietly, I want you to know something. He looked at her. The binding was meant to save your life, but it did more than that. She reached out and touched his face, her cold fingers gentle against his skin. It saved mine. Not my body, you did that on Valith 9, but my soul. I had forgotten what it meant to live. You reminded me. Marcus covered her hand with his own. Then let's make sure we both keep living. The battle began at dawn. Swarm drones crashed through the palace windows like a wave of nightmares. Marcus and his soldiers met them with fire and steel. The halls that had known centuries of peace became rivers of blood and screaming. Marcus fought like a demon. The binding had made him faster, stronger, more deadly than any human had a right to be. But underneath all the impossible power, he was still the same man who had carried a dying princess through hell. He still fought like he had everything to lose, because he did. Seraphina fought beside him, her twin blades dancing through the air. She moved like water, like shadow, like death given beautiful form. 400 years of training came together in every strike, every parry, every kill. They were magnificent together. The mortal and the immortal. The soldier and the princess. 2 souls bound by blood and dead, and something neither of them had words for. But the swarm kept coming. For every drone they killed, 10 more took its place. For every corridor they held, 3 more fell. The palace guards were dying by the dozens. The ancient weapons that had protected the throne world for millennia were failing one by one. The central sanctum, Seraphina gasped between strikes. There's a weapon there, an ancient device from the First Wars. It can destroy the Hive Admiral's flagship, but it takes time to activate. How much time? 10 minutes. Marcus looked at the endless tide of swarm drones pouring through the palace. 10 minutes might as well be 10 years. Go, he said. Activate the weapon. I'll hold him here. Marcus, go. He grabbed her arm and pulled her close. For one moment, in the middle of the chaos and the death and the screaming, they were the only 2 people in the universe. I didn't carry you through hell just to watch you die in your own home. Go save your people. I'll buy you the time. She looked at him with those red eyes that had seen 4 centuries of existence. Eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. Then she kissed him. It was brief, desperate, a promise wrapped in fire. Don't you dare die, she whispered. I'm not finished with you yet. Then she was gone, running toward the central sanctum with her guards. And Marcus Cole turned to face the swarm alone. He fought for 10 minutes that felt like 10 years. The Hive Admiral himself came for Marcus, a monster of metal and flesh. 20 feet tall, with a mind that had conquered 100 worlds. It should have been no contest. Marcus was one man, one mortal, one insignificant human who should have died on a forgotten moon months ago. But Marcus wasn't fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Taurus, who had died screaming in a canyon pass. For Kim, who had given her life without a word of complaint. For every human who had ever been told they were worthless, disposable, nothing. He was fighting for Seraphina. The battle was brutal. The Hive Admiral broke Marcus's bones like twigs. It tore through his armor like paper. It should have killed him a dozen times over. But humans, it turned out, were remarkably poor at dying when someone was waiting for them. Marcus kept fighting. He kept bleeding. He kept getting up every time he fell. And when the ancient weapon finally activated, when the beam of pure energy shot from the palace tower and struck the swarm flagship, the Hive Admiral turned to look at its dying fleet for just one moment. One moment was enough. Marcus drove his combat knife through the Hive Admiral's central eye and didn't stop pushing until the monster stopped moving. When Seraphina found him, he was lying in a pool of his own blood, barely breathing. The Hive Admiral's massive body lay broken beside him. Around them, the remaining swarm drones were retreating, their command structure shattered. Their invasion failed. The war was over. Marcus. Seraphina fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. Marcus, stay with me. Stay with me. He looked up at her and smiled. Did we win? We won. We won because of you. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heart, that stubborn, impossible human heart still beating. Weak, but alive. You did it. No, he whispered. We did it. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood before the full court of the Eternal Dominion. His wounds had healed. His strength had returned. But the galaxy had changed in ways that could never be undone. The High General stepped forward. Marcus Cole, you have performed a service beyond measure. You have saved our throne world, ended our war, and shown us what courage truly means. The question before this court is simple. What should you be called? You are not Noctari. You are no longer fully human. You are something new, something the galaxy has never seen. The hall fell silent. Lord Morthen glared at Marcus with undisguised hatred. But even he could not argue with what Marcus had done. Seraphina stepped forward. She took Marcus's hand and faced the court with her head held high. He's called my equal, she said. And if eternity stretches before us, I will spend it making sure he never forgets it. The court erupted in whispers. An equal, a human or whatever Marcus had become, declared equal to Noctari royalty. It was unprecedented. It was impossible. It was the future. Marcus looked at Seraphina. She looked at him. And in that moment, they both understood that their story was just beginning. Outside the palace, across the galaxy, humans were watching. They had seen the footage of Valith 9. They had heard the stories of the final battle. They had watched one of their own rise from nothing to stand beside immortals as wise. Equal. The expendable species had seen what they could become, and they were done being disposable. In the mining colonies and the servant quarters and the auxiliary barracks, humans were whispering a name. Marcus Cole. The man who carried a princess through hell. The man who killed a Hive Admiral with a combat knife. The man who proved that human life had value. Dominion had won their war, but humanity had won something greater. They had won hope. And hope, as the immortals were about to learn, was the most dangerous weapon in the universe.